Hi, Kevin. I'd just like to thank you for coming and being the first person on our podcast. What I want to do is bring a little bit more of a person's history where we go from the beginning stages of your life as a child, how you grew up with your parents, all the way through any type of life experience you've had, what you want to do in the future, anything that you are striving to do. So just to let everybody know, I met Kevin through jiu-jitsu. I did a photo shoot for him. He was going to have a fight. He needed a headshot. So I ended up taking some photos for him. When I was with him that day, we started talking. He was telling me a little bit about his life, how he grew up, and we exchanged some things in our lives. It made me more curious to know more about him and to get to know him better. I am honored here today on Veterans Day to be able to help you tell your story. I'm very excited for this. I just want to thank you, Kevin, for being here.
Well, thank you, because usually on Veterans Day, I'm real shut in. I don't really go out or do anything just because it was like a special moment in my life and it's over. It's kind of like how today is a little gloomy. And so this gets me out of the house. So it's good. I'm happy to be here.
It is very gloomy outside, raining, storming a bit.
I kind of like it. I call it the Goonies weather.
I love that movie.
Me too.
Let's get started. Your early childhood, where you were born, how you were raised. Let's get into that right now. If you can share some of your experiences.
I was born 1980, Valley Medical Hospital. My mom used to tell me I was the second baby in that year to be born with their umbilical cord wrapped around their neck 4 times.
Wow.
So I tell people I've been fighting to breathe since birth. So jiu-jitsu ties into that. Both my parents were meth addicts. My earliest memories is my dad just beating my mom, or my mom real strung out, running in circles on the floor, screaming at the ceiling. Really bad experience, or what I was born into. I tell people I was born into fear and swaddled with chaos. To see your dad beat your mom, I remember like she'd be cooking eggs over the fire like we were in pioneer times because we didn't have no power. And I can remember black and blue face. She was just worried about if I was content with the little bit of eggs we had. We depended on handouts or food from the food bank. I mean, but it was so common that I didn't know it was different. I didn't know. It's not like I went to school and kids talked about like in preschool or whatever in kindergarten that their parents are beating each other. I can remember like my mom punched my dad at a barbecue that we had at our house, and he like chased her in the house. She had a knife in the bathroom with me. I was probably like 4, and my sister was probably like 8 months old. And it was like that. What's that movie with Jack Nicholson where he beats down the door and his head comes in the door?
Oh, The Shining?
The Shining, yeah. But my mom just screaming top of her lungs and start like stabbing through the door. And I remember it was like a bloody mess. I can remember like calling, we learned in school, you call 911. When there's a problem, I can remember like my mom just carved up from punching out windows in our house, laying on the couch and calling 911, and the police or the dispatcher, my mom hung up, the dispatcher called back, and my mom was like, oh, he just doesn't know what he's doing. He's just a little kid and he just learned it in school.
Right.
But I really felt like helpless.
Uh-huh.
I was probably like 5. My dad robbed the liquor store right next to our house at night. He went in, broke in, took all the liquor and cigarettes, and had my brothers as lookouts. It's like my first or second stint in foster care. Then going into foster care, that's just a trip. I remember like, I didn't know what race was really, 4 years old, 5 years old.
Right.
And I remember going to the home, it's like on the East Bay, and everybody called me Cracker and stuff like that. And I was like, always thinking on my feet because my parents were methed out. So I spent a lot of time outside, and I used to go hustle quarters in the front of the liquor store just to buy food. I can remember like them calling me all this racial shit. And I'm like, oh, I'm part black. And they were like, what? And
From where?
I was like, my mom's Blackfoot Indian. And they were like, oh, you cool? And so I fit right in. But I came back with my parents, and I think my dad got locked up. And so my mom we had 2 houses on our property. We lived in Campbell, and she had opened up the back home to the Hells Angels. So we had Hells Angels live in our back house. I just remember one time I like slammed my finger in a car door, and this like drunk guy wanted to drill a hole in my fingernail. I'm like, what the heck's going on here? But the police, I guess there was like an investigation, because I remember my mom telling me, hey, if the police ever pull you out of the house, like, or pull you out of school, don't tell them anything. Like, don't tell them we have guns in the house. Don't tell them there's drugs. Don't tell them. And I remember the ATF and the local PD had pulled me out of my school,
Mm-hmm.
and they were trying to ask me questions, and I told them there's no guns, only BB guns. Like, I didn't snitch on anything. And then maybe like a couple weeks after that, I was on the couch. Like I said, I'm like 4 or 5 years old. I was like, I don't know if I had something wrong with my stomach, but
Mm-hmm.
I was like going to the bathroom on myself. That's how sick I was.
Wow.
My mom took some napkins from the Burger King next door because we didn't have anything, stuffed some panties, put it on me. It's like a
Stop it,
makeshift
yeah.
diaper. So the police we had 2 glass doors in front of our front door.
Mm-hmm.
They blasted in the door. I was on the living room. I remember running into the room where she was at with one of the guys while my dad's locked up, and she's hopping out the window saying, "You'll be okay." Like, left me and my sister. That was like the longest stint I did in foster care. After that, all my brothers were half brothers, and so they went and lived with their other parent. And my
Right.
grandma took my sister out, left me in foster care. So I was like on my own from 5 years old till my aunt got me. I went to this one foster home where they like made us outside in a dog kennel, like a big 10 by 10 fenced, put us out in a dog kennel. They had like a couple boxes of toys. I remember one time I left like a RC car track out, and the guy beat me with it. One of the kids was like, "Yeah, if you leave a toy out, you're done."
Man, that is rough.
So one day he comes in, they fed us out of bowls, like we ate with our hands. It was like we were treated like animals. He comes into this dog kennel, and there's an older boy there. He's like, "This guy is a faggot." He was massaging me. He made this kid give him a massage, and he's like, he touched me, started making fun of him while that kid ended up hanging himself.
Oh, no.
So the police came, and I don't think they got in trouble. I think it was more, they just thought it was a suicide, and we were too young to speak up or understand. They had pulled us out of that home. I went and lived with my aunt.
So how long were you at that home?
I lived with my aunt. I should have been in first grade, but I had to repeat. I didn't go to school for the whole year, so going from foster home to foster home. So I ended up, I think, from like a year, probably there. I ended up living with my aunt, and that was the first time I saw normalcy. Like, my uncle used to be mayor of Campbell. He worked as like an exec at a business. They had a Leave It to Beaver kind of home, a nice home. So that's when I really started realizing like some of the stuff I went through was not normal. And I lived with her until about probably 7 years old. And my dad, out of prison, he was going through AA. He got custody of me. That's how bad my mom was. She was so drugged out that they gave me to a felon over my mom. My dad, at that point, he was trying to really get right. He still had that aggression. I could see he would beat the shit out of my brother or me if we got out of line. I learned real quick, you don't fight ass whoopings. Do you want the easy way or the hard way? I'll be like, the easy way. I think that's where my aspirations to be tougher than him, to protect my mom, to be tougher than him. Even in that time frame of him, when first early in his recovery, I can remember my mom would come by sometimes. One time, like, he tried to force himself upon her, and I jumped on his back. He like pushed me off and then threw her out by her hair. And that was like the last time they tried to be together. But my dad believed in tough love. I never felt like I fit in with him. He ended up getting remarried. Me and my sister were just kind of like the third wheel in the house. He was very good. My stepbrother, like, he taught my stepbrother how to ride motorcycles. So whatever this kid wanted, he got. Same thing with my stepsister. And it was like, I would ask for something, say, get a job. I'm like 10, you know. But it gave me a hustle. I started cutting lawns at 10 years old, trying to make money. And I was paying rent, actually, at 12. That aspect made me a good Marine. But that early childhood, I think I just suppressed it. It's like hard to tell some of the people, like, being abused physically, mentally, sexually abused. It's like those kind of things you don't really want to speak about. So I became a troubled teen. I think I had aspirations to be a gangbanger. 12 years. I liked this Neverland kind of Lost Boys.
Yeah.
Like cartoons like that when I was a kid. Or one of the first movies I saw that really inspired me to join a gang was the movie called The Wanderers. There's that opening scene of those 2 kids running fear. And then that one guy comes in when they're about to get beat up and he's leave the kid alone. I was like, oh man, I got to join a gang. I was like 12 years old trying to like ended up joining like tagging crews, because being a white boy, it's kind of like, You know, you can be a northerner or a Crip. I think I was like 12 years old the first time I got arrested with people who were affiliated with gangs. So I had to go through an at-risk program for like gang members. And I'm like 12 years old. I think I tried to steal my friend like some hair nets and a little bottle of liquor. It was just like stupid, just trying to fit in. And over at Seven Trees, where my mom lived, which is a pretty rough area if you're from San Jose. So it's called Six Trees in a Bush. But yeah, I got arrested there and I had to go through like where they showed us like American Me, the movie. There's like that one white boy that's in the American Me. So I shaved my head and thought I was like hardcore because I was going through this gang awareness course.
Right.
I went on being in the streets. I got kicked out of my house probably my sophomore year out of my parents' house and just lived on the streets, whatever I could do to make money, robbing, selling drugs, hustling, whatever we could just to make money. I was lucky enough to be taken in by a really nice lady. That was like probably first mother figure I kind of had because my mom was just so drugged out. I was maybe like 13 when I was like, I can't see my mom no more. There's no protecting her. It's just she was so addicted to drugs and I could see mental health. Like she got raped when she was real young. A lot of abuse. I'm talking like grade school. She used to believe a man wasn't a man unless he beat her. She did have a good man at one point when I was like in junior high, but she threw boiling hot water on him. It's just wild, crazy. I mean, her nickname's Krazy Carol. She passed away a couple years ago, but my sister's Scary Carrie, my brother's Evil Eddie. Like somebody asked me where you get your nickname. I'm like, my whole family's psycho. I think that when I met that lady, she was like very loving, but we were still knuckleheads. I mean, I was so bad that the police department was like, or where I lived at in San Jose on the west side, it has its own non-exclusive or whatever. So the sheriff department actually handles that area.
So
PD.
it's probably unincorporated.
Unincorporated, yeah.
Right.
So the PD or the sheriff's department was like, if we catch you in this area, we're going to arrest you every time. You know, when you're the white boy kicking with everybody and you're the one that the police are like, hey, if you're kicking with these guys, you're terrible. So I ended up moving to the east side. I'd been arrested a couple times, but I was looking at, the last time I got arrested, I was looking at some felonies. Yeah, so I ended up being locked up. You talk about a pivotal moment. Like I got 23-hour lockdown for getting in a fight in the holding cell. They thought it was me. It was like, I'm going to be fighting everybody. So I was with like real criminals and crazy people. I remember one guy sitting next to me on the couch. He got an hour to come out, shower, or do whatever. And so I was just watching a little TV and the guy comes up to me and he's like, are you Satan? Yeah, dude, I am. Like, leave me alone. I remember sitting in that cell and looking out at the moonlight and I'm like, if you get me out here, I swear, like I'll never go back to, which I've done that before. Like I've stole cars where we got chased and I've hidden in backyards. Oh, if you get me out of this, I'll never do it again. And you get out of it and go back to it. But that point was like, I needed to change. Like I saw like prison. It's one thing to be like kicking it with Hispanic, Black and all that, like in gangs, but like in prison, it's very segregated.
It is.
You know, so it's like, I wasn't trying to be no Peckerwood or no like white supremacist or nothing like that. And two, it's like, man, it's like the realization of being told when to eat, when to shower and have to follow like politics as far as like the gang. I didn't want to live that life. It wasn't like something that like, it wasn't my aspiration to be locked up. Even though when I was younger, I thought it'd be cool to get locked up until one guy that's from my neighborhood had been locked up for 10 years. Like when I was in elementary school, he got locked up. And I remember being in high school, he got out and he was like told, turn out. He had a husband in prison and stuff.
Wow.
I'm like, that guy's hardcore. Dude, I ain't trying to be that way. And I remember just like praying, and even the judge on my court date, it was like third time I've been in front of him. He's, I don't like you. I don't think you're going to change. This time you're not talking your way out of anything. You're going to get the book thrown at you. So I was looking at prison time and that morning, let me back up. I remember calling my dad, which I didn't really talk to him a lot. So I remember calling my dad, hey, if there's any way you can help me out, I'm looking at doing some time. And he had got me, and he called whoever, bad boy bail bonds or something like that, talked to a judge because he ran halfway houses at the time.
Okay.
And so he got me at 4 a.m. I just remember them coming in, hey, you're going to get bailed out do you want to stay for breakfast? I'm like, fuck that.
It's like, get me out of here.
Yeah, like, why would I stay for breakfast? Your breakfasts are nasty. Like, I'm not staying for no breakfast. So I remember getting out and I went back home to where I was living on the west side. And my whole house was robbed when I was gone. We were drug dealing and stuff like that and just hang around like knuckleheads and be friends because I had 2 pit bulls. So they would have ripped whoever came if they didn't know them. I remember walking through the west side with a machete and like walking down the street, like looking for anybody wearing my clothes. Even like like an op, like another gang rolled up. They're like, oh, never mind. So I called my dad that night and I was like, hey, I'm going to kill somebody. This is real, you know? And he allowed me to come back home. So I went back home and went back to school.
And at what age was this?
It's probably 18.
18, okay.
So the courts or the lawyer that saw me, he was like, somebody snitched on some stuff we were doing. Like, you showed me the report and it was all blacked out. Like, somebody snitched. So you want to look good, you go back to school and get your diploma. I had maybe a year and a half of school I needed to finish when I got kicked out. And so I went back to school, and one day I accidentally hopped on, like, I looked young, so I didn't have no money. I went from drug dealing, having 2 cars, my own place, to like nothing. I used to hop the little school buses that would come at this place called CCOC. It had an adult ed in the back, and then like it had vocational schooling for like high school kids. So I'd be like, whatever bus was closest to my house school, I would hop that bus and ride it home. And one day I hopped the wrong bus. It's funny. It's like the school that's right across from Solidarity. I want to call it, I don't know if it's Pioneer. I think Pioneer is the school. I was at that bus stop right off of Blossom Hill and, you know, going to take the city bus home. And our Marine Corps recruiter rolls up and he was like, hey, are you Frank? I was like, nah, dude, I ain't no Frank. Get out here. And he was like, you ever thought about joining the Marine Corps? I was like, you know, when I was like 16, I remember getting in a fight at school. And when I was getting suspended, a Marine Corps recruiter came in. He's like, you're a natural born killer, son. You ever thought about joining the Marines? And I was like, you know, I was like all anti-government, graffiti, you know, gangbang and all that. I kind of told him my story. And he goes, what would you do if I helped you get your charges dropped? I said, yeah, I'll join. I was like, 5 years in prison, 4 years in the military. I was like, you got to watch your back on both, but at least one, they give you a gun.
Exactly.
He had gone to my court dates with just the initial packet saying I'd already been accepted. And like my dad pulled some strings he knew a DA or whatever that knew a judge. And the only thing is they told me to lie and say I'd never been arrested to the recruit, like to the Marines. They only inspect, like he said, like 15%. So the judge had let me off. One of the places that they were trying to get to press charges didn't press charges. And the person that was snitching retracted all the stuff. So they pretty much, I was like clear slate other than I had to get let off probation. So they let me off probation. And then fast forward, I was one of the people they did the background check on. So I remember walking in and my recruiter's his head's down. And I was like, fuck. They were like, you ever been arrested? And I was like, no. They were like, what's this? And it was like a record like this thick. I thought the Marine Corps was going to accept me. And I was like, I'm off probation. I'm going back to the street. They were able to pull my paperwork because it was before everything was like on the computers, databases. They resubmitted everything and I had to get like waivers. They had to put it in front of a board. People come and be character witnesses on my behalf to allow me to go in because I had everything from fights to graffiti to conspiracy to commit sales you know, for drugs and stuff. I went to school and I ended up going to a house party and meeting my wife, who's my wife now. She was eventually my girlfriend at the time and she had gotten pregnant. So it was like now even more of a reason to join. So I just stuck to going to school and try not to get in trouble. I didn't want to raise like I was raised, you know, and kind of like drugs and that kind of lifestyle. It really was my push to join the Corps. Like going to school, I really did try. They told me I needed a year and a half of schooling. I did in 6 months.
Oh, that's great.
Busted my ass. Ended up doing like the GED to get credits, which is, I freaking suck at math. I even brought a calculator in on the math test and still failed in. Yeah, I suck at math. But yeah, I went into the Marines. And I was real tough from going from like gangbanging to like doing my own thing, like no one telling me nothing. I remember getting in trouble at school. They're like, we're going to call your parents. I call my parents. I don't fucking live at home. Like, what are you going to do to me? And then it was definitely a slap in the face of like discipline Yeah, my boot camp was we were supposed to have 4 drill instructors. We had 3, and one of them was our senior was like trying to get out, so it was really
Mhm.
only 2. There was one that was like super abusive, and the other one that was like fed up because he got stuck with all the details because he was the younger guy. It was torture. I can remember I got in a lot of fights, street fights. I got more fights in that 3 months in boot camp than like I've ever did in my whole
Oh,
life.
was it authority or was it just your peers?
They would make us fight our peers, like
Okay.
so there's thing called, like, not breaking ranks, like, when
Okay.
you're in formation, like, no one can enter it. So he would do our drill instructor would purposely march us into another formation. From the street, a lot
Oh,
of these
man.
kids were, like, pushing and shoving, like,
Right.
I was throwing bows, like, I was trying to knock people out, and then they rewarded that violent behavior that I saw in, like, my dad and I saw in the streets,
Mhm.
and how fear like, if somebody fears you, they also have to respect you in a way, because otherwise bad things are gonna happen to them. So I remember like in boot camp, the first time I the drill instructor gave me praise was, or they took our shit bag, like our worst Marine, and they made him hold another platoon's flag called a
Mhm.
guidon, and they made it turn it upside down and drag it in the dirt, and they called him the anti-guide, like the Antichrist. That's a shit bag, but he's our shit bag. Like a gang, if you're messing with one of my guys, even if I don't really like him, he's still part of our gang. I remember one of their guys stepped out, grabbed our guy, and started shaking him up.
Mhm.
I just stepped out, moved my shitbag's head out of the way, and just blasted this guy. I knocked him out so bad he forgot he was in boot camp. The drill instructor used to make me shrink. I was tall. They'd be like, shrink. I came down, and he put the bill of his cover in my face. And we won't do that again, will we? And he winked at me. So, boot camp, like I seen that same drill instructor like beat people's faces in with butt stocks until their teeth came out of their mouth or
Wow.
choke people out. So it was like real violent. They'll flip you out of your rack like onto the cement from the
Mhm.
top bunk. Just crazy. Make you fight other recruits like in the
Wow.
bathroom,
Mhm.
stuff like that. During that time though, my senior drill instructor, he calls me in to the duty hut and he's reading my service record book, which is most people when they go into boot camp, it's maybe 10 pages long.
Uh-huh.
Mine was like this thick from my criminal record. And he told me I've done 22 years in the Marine Corps. And he's like, I'm only a staff sergeant, which is not that. I mean, somebody who did 22 years, you should be like a gunny for a sergeant. He said I had a criminal record just like you, and it held me back. And he goes, welcome to the largest gang in the world, the United States Marine Corps. And he pulled out all my bad paperwork and he
Right.
threw it away. Starting a new life, and it really made me see, okay, I can reinvent myself.
Absolutely.
The only thing is the violent part was still there. I really tried to be the best Marine I could be, like in the fleet. I was eventually, as an NCO, I was 5.0, pros and cons, which you ask a Marine, like that's a perfect score on your like counseling. I busted my ass to be a better person, take that same drive that I had for the streets and
Mhm.
apply it into the Marines, which the Marines is legit like a big gang. It's
Is that the pivotal point in the Marines?
yeah, definitely. I always carried that with me, like the shame of that lifestyle
Mm.
kind of like let me see that I can tear down who I was, and the
Mhm.
Marines build me to who I could be in life. It helped me a lot, like to be more motivated because I was pretty depressed in boot camp because it was just like no sleep, day in, day out. The
Mhm.
grind, it just wears you down.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't hear from home a lot. It's really that fog of war. Your mail's behind. There's times where like our drone instructor wouldn't even feed us because we had shit to do that day. I remember the chow hall workers coming out, hey, your platoon didn't eat today. Our drone instructor, the real abusive one, he'd be like,
Mhm.
yeah, they did. And the
What
guy
a
would be like,
jerk.
no, they didn't. He's like, yeah, they did. And then he would make us about face and smell through our nose. And he'd smell good. And we're like, yes, sir. And he's like, that's your food for the day kind of thing. So
He
I
was
mean,
tough on you
yeah,
guys?
stuff that they wouldn't fly today. Like we had 110 people initially in my platoon.
Mhm.
Only 2 were physical breaks that got kicked out. And then both of those physical breaks were because of that one drill sugar. And then we had mostly were mental breaks. So I think we graduated with 77 of the original. It was just like mentally tough. There's
Yeah.
guys I looked at, man, this dude's a stud. He's gonna make it the whole time. Neo versus my son just went through boot camp. They graduated with everybody. They really are improving. Let me take a sip of this because my
That's fine.
they really are improving, I guess, some of the mental health aspects, or at least watching more. My platoon, my whole company was under investigation for like abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And my drone instructor was like, man, if you tell, it's just going to make it worse. Because another platoon snitched and they got all their drone instructors relieved.
Uh-huh.
We just bit the bullet. And that's how I thought becoming a Marine was. A lot of those guys, their drone instructors were Vietnam vets. So they got freaking shit beat out of them. Different drone instructors. But anytime we did anything in groups,
Mm-hmm.
our drone instructors would be like, see those guys over there? They're pussies.
Right.
They didn't earn the title. So and that's where it starts. I think the Marines are like number one on suicide, number one on like dietary problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're pretty high on the list on divorce. I think it's like 75% or higher divorce rate in the
Mm-hmm.
Marines. The Marines, they don't want to ask for help. Eventually, I got to the infantry unit. I excelled within my first school of infantry. I got a meritorious mass, which is like an award. And right when I got in the fleet, I got another award. Then 9/11 happened.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we were sitting, getting ready to go on a run. So I stepped up as a married Marine. I stepped to get there at 4 a.m. So I went go crash in one of my friend's rooms on the floor until our formation and go run. One of our senior Marines, who was a shitbag,
Mm-hmm.
he comes in. He's, hey, a plane just flew into the World Trade Center. And we're like, man, get the fuck out of here, dude. I sleep. And then he came back like, oh, another plane flew into the other building. I was like, okay, we're deploying. We're the next on the cycle of deployments, but they sped it up. It was like, hey, we're leaving in a week. We're leaving in 2 weeks. Every other day was like a different time frame of when we're going to leave. And then they finally told us, hey, you got 4 days and then we're leaving. So I packed up my whole base housing, put it in storage,
Mm-hmm.
sent my wife back home because I didn't want her with my daughter, and she was pregnant with my son too, my older two.
Huh.
I didn't want her to be home there alone. I wanted her to be back with family. And we did 8.5 months. First unit deployed right after 9/11. We
Mm-hmm.
supported Operation Anaconda. It wasn't like our Cobras got caught, smoked some bodies and stuff like that, but we ended up having to go take over an airfield in Pakistan to support the mission. And there was some word of some terrorists in Africa. Like they pulled us out of Afghanistan because we were bombing the opium fields,
Mm-hmm.
which Afghanistan supplies like 85% or more of the world's opium. So they were like, if you cripple their economy, it will cripple ours, I think, because the pharmaceutical companies or whatever. So we pulled out of there, which is bullshit, because that's where I started losing faith in like our government system.
Mhm.
Because it was when they rebuilt like all the terrorists there. It was when my friends started dying when they would go over to Afghanistan. Like, I mean, OEF 2, OEF 3, and then OIF 2, like the first invasion.
Mm-hmm.
It was like not a lot of people died. When it was like after they stayed there prolonged, it was
Mhm.
like that's when people started passing away. I had friends that went out as combat replacements, and I became an advanced infantry instructor.
Mhm.
I was a training NCO, and then I became chief of ops for division schools. So I trained over 15,000 Marines that went into Iraq and Afghanistan,
Wow.
but also received
Mhm.
the guys getting blown up, coming back and stuff like that. So
Oh,
it gave me a lot
that
of survivor's guilt, because I felt like I should have deployed it, because I could have probably protected some of the guys from my unit. Yeah, so leaving the military, I had a lot of survivor's guilt from not deploying a second time
Mhm.
with my unit. It kind of fucked me up. I ended up working for the government. I always had issues coming back, from the Marines. I always had a lot of issues, marital issues, just angry all the time, angry at the world,
Right.
angry at childhood, stuff like that, and not trusting people.
Mhm.
And like 2014 or 2013 was like my worst year as far as mental health. And then 2014, I tried to kill myself, like really tried. I had a couple little incidents before then, but I feel
Mhm.
like those were like more cries for help. But yeah, I took on like 100 plus painkillers. I drank so much that I think I still have the high score at the VA. I blew like a 400. The Marine that I met in a PTSD class had called me a couple times within like 15, 20 minutes.
Mhm.
I was ignoring him because I was like literally like dying. He was like, man, you're slurring your words. You know what's going on? I told him I'm checking out. And he was like, Marines, you better tell me where you are right now so I can pick you up, because I was at home. And so he
Right.
picked me up and he rushed me to the ER. I'm fighting off the people, let me die kind of thing,
Mhm.
screaming, let me die.
Mhm.
He was like, let him pump your stomach, please. He's like crying. So
Yeah.
I let him pump my stomach. I was in ICU for 4 days.
Mhm.
And then I got voluntold I had to go to the mental ward.
Yeah, it's mandatory, I
Yeah.
think. Is it
Well,
72 hours
they
or what?
wanted me to volunteer because they
Mhm.
said they would take my gun rights away. I eventually volunteered, but I
Mhm.
already did 4 days at ICU. So I looked at it as I've been under watch for 4 days already because I just had my youngest son.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, I fucked up. Like, I want to be here for him, and life's not going to be better if I looked at it as life would be better for my family if I was gone.
What do you think pushed you to that point, to taking the pills? What was going through your head?
When I first got out, I got into MMA, right? I
Mm-hmm.
did MMA for like 2005 to like December 2010. I think my last fight was like December 2010. Dealing with the headache of some of the lower organizations, and also having like brain injury issues, like fighting heavyweight and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And also in the Marines, like some of the head trauma there, I think that caught up with me.
Mm-hmm.
And just like ruining my marriage just
Yep.
from being like so angry. I could see my kids starting to pick up like my anxiety, like
Right.
being out in the public. I'd like, always get into fights almost, or like me telling my family, stand on my left, stand on my right, like picking up threats
Mm.
coming up, and just overwhelmed that. And then to feeling like a failure, like the MMA career didn't pick up. I ended up leaving that. I was government contracting, but that was just like bringing up a lot of military trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and I just tired of life. Just wanted to end it all. It's something I've struggled with. Like, I think seeing that kid hang himself, like we were in the same room. I woke
Mm-hmm.
up with the kid dead. And I was maybe like 10 or 11, I think, the first time I tried to hang myself. And like I said, I had other attempts, but this time I was like really seeing that there's no end to the trauma I'm causing to others besides like taking myself out. Like
Right.
there's an old quote from Plato, like there's no end to war but death.
Mm-hmm.
So now I look at that a little bit different, which I'll touch on a little bit. But so yeah, I ended up trying to take my life, got saved by that Marine. It was in the middle ward. It's all bad. Like the first room they put me in, the dude had shit everywhere. I'm like, man, I don't
Oh,
like, and the dudes are watching us through the pictures, and I'm like, I'm in the wrong fucking place. Like, you got a place for just PTSD, which
right.
they don't. So it's just for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But guys walk around naked and stuff like that. I'm just like, man, this is not like something I want to be in. Some way I ended up on like the Jello pudding snack list. I don't know how, but
Yeah.
so I did a week there, and they ended up putting a bigger hold on me they ended up putting a mandatory hold because it was like a holiday weekend.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, look, I've been here already 48 hours. Let me go. Let me out of here. Because I was like, it was the beginning of the week when I tried to commit suicide. And then it was the 4 days in ICU for my heart to restart. Then I did the 2 days, and they were like, the doctors at home, or because of the holiday,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not going to approve you. So I started like throwing around furniture and shit. Like a couch or a chair is like 150 pounds. And I was pretty big, so I'm like chucking furniture. Like I made a noose, like to show them I'm like I could still hang myself.
Yeah.
Like I stole a pin or something. Like just total. Like I went on like a hunger strike.
Uh-huh.
Like so they ended up putting a hold on me and kept me in there. I think I was there for 2 weeks. And they try to tell me because I have a brain injury plus severe PTSD that I have no rights or some shit like that. So they ended up letting me out. Then I had to have somebody from the brain injury area, like a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to her, like, this is not helping me mentally being in here. Two, being locked down like that, it sucks. Reminded me of like deployment
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that, where you have no, or being locked up when I was younger. They control everything. Like I was starting to look up, they were bringing the dog to pet. Like I'm finna take that thing hostage. Be like, hey, let me out.
Take me out of here.
Let me out of here. You know, I'm looking at the walls like, man, I can hop these walls. Like they ain't chasing me, but they ended up letting me out. And the Marine that saved my life, he introduced me into cannabis because the VA's got me hooked on painkillers. I was going in for my back, and they were like, stop coming in. Like, we're just going to start sending you pain meds. So I went from taking 1 a day to 2 a day to like, eventually it was like 14 a day, plus Flexerol. So that was also a big issue on like me committing suicide, I think, is that addiction on the pain meds. It just made me like more angry, more irritable. And then I was on like 17 prescriptions total, like for mental health, which a lot of those, the side effects are suicide ideation and stuff like that. So the Marine that saved my life, he goes, hey, you ever tried cannabis? And I was like, yeah, when I was younger, I smoked blunts and drink 40s. I was like a day-to-day He goes, no, like medically. So he had given me like 100 milligram capsule and like a 180 milligram cookie. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I used to take 14 Norcos a day. What the fuck's this gonna do? I took them both. Not a good idea. I was like laid out, but I was so desperate. I was like, I need to try something other than these pills. So I researched like CBD and I went into the dispensary, which
Mm-hmm.
was cool because like I saw people there look like my third grade teacher. I'm like, dang, you smoke weed? And I'm like, so I started using cannabis, but I went in there and I was like, hey, I'm a total bitch when it comes to THC. This stuff's too strong. I was like, what's the lowest THC in this? So they
Mm-hmm.
introduced me some like CBD stuff that had a little bit of THC, and I started using it. And within 3 days, I stopped drinking. I stopped taking my prescription meds,
Mm-hmm.
and I was hanging out with a couple of vets, and I was like, I wish there was something like this on a bigger scale for vets to come and hang out, because it was brought up that camaraderie that I was missing from the military,
Mm-hmm.
and hanging out with these guys, joking and smoking, because a lot of people don't understand vets. Like, we say things that seem weird. I could be like, oh, fucking kill that guy. Other people are like, oh my God, you're crazy. But to another vet, it's like
Yeah, it's
normal.
human.
Or we use the F word a lot,
Mm-hmm.
My
Right.
wife's like, always, there's kids around. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. There was nothing really what I was looking for. So I had ran into another veteran who was starting like a group meeting for vets. And I told him, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And then he introduced me to some veteran growers, and no one really wanted to support my deal. So I just set off on my own to do it, of inspiring veterans to start their own like
Mm-hmm.
group of vets to come hang out. We'd give out free cannabis to the
Mm-hmm.
veterans that show up. So it took off like within the first 6 months. I think we had like maybe 4 or 5 chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had one in Colorado, SoCal. We had a couple, or one in NorCal. I was running one in the Bay Area, and I got invited, or we went to a High Times Cannabis Cup, and then they invited
Okay.
me to come speak at their next one, which was in Colorado at a big 420 event. Like, it was standing room only. Usually you look at their veteran panels that they have where veterans speak, there'd be like maybe 30 people in the crowd, and it would be like on the last day where no one
Was
cared
there?
about
Yeah.
it. There was people like, hey, I flew from Alaska to
Mm-hmm.
talk to you and do this stuff. So I
Mm-hmm.
really saw that this was inspiring veterans. I met who's one of my business partners now, Sean Kiernan. He's a super smart guy, more business orientated. He
Mm-hmm.
went to school for business, was like on Wall Street. I just knew I couldn't do it by myself. My good friend Mark, who's another Marine, he's out of SAC. He ran our SAC chapter. He's real by the book, disciplined kind of guy. I needed that because I'm definitely not a by the book guy. The three of us came together, and we've given out it's probably the lower end, but like over 20 million in cannabis
Mm-hmm.
to veterans. We fought to pass laws. At one point, we were not only United States wide, but we were like worldwide. We've did a cross country tour. We've done a lot for vets. Now, because what I saw from doing that, I ended up in the hospital 1 year after my suicide attempt again, even though I was helping vets.
Right.
But it made me realize that I needed to help myself, because I jumped right
First,
into
yeah.
helping other people
Mm-hmm.
within 30 days of committing suicide,
Wow.
or trying to commit suicide.
How did it work from getting off the painkillers to the cannabis? Did you slowly wean yourself off the pain meds?
I went cold
And then-
turkey because I didn't have no more meds. They took all my pain meds. So like,
Right.
I took them all that night. So it's
Right.
like I didn't have, and I got put on like the flag list for the VA. But I did smoke a ton of weed. Like, I came up with the slogan Semper High, which in the Marine Corps, Semper Fi means always faithful, but
Right.
Semper High, always high. There was like a good portion of time where there wasn't 1 minute in the day where I wasn't like high on weed. But so even with cannabis, I was still very unhappy, still secluded into like being in the limelight now. Like, there was people that started like fake accounts about me talking shit. I'd get like threats from people, and so it really made me shut in a little bit or stay distant
Mm-hmm.
from people. I was just afraid to trust people, because like people who I thought were good people ended up trying to use veterans for their own gain, or would try to use us so they can come up and burn the veteran in the end. And
Right.
and at one point, like, I remember telling one guy, if you were in front of me right now, I'd fucking punch your head in. And then I was like, that's, and then like he told a bunch of people, and I was like, man, that's like not the image I want. For us, I stepped back, and my business partners took the reins a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but I spent a long time like trying to find myself. And then maybe 2017, 2018,
Mm-hmm.
I ran into a guy named Tim, who's out of Claudio Franca. He was at a L&L barbecue. His ears all blown out. I'm like, I just do MMA. So I see guys like that. I think MMA. I didn't think jujitsu. I was like, hey, you fight, man? He's like, I tried a little MMA, but I do jujitsu. His ears look like he'd been training for a long time. So I was like, man, I got that itch to come back to train. But I'm thinking of just doing jujitsu because like with MMA, kickboxing, like you can't train hard every day because you get your nose broke or you get banged up. Versus like jujitsu, you can train super hard and next day, even though you feel like you got hit by a truck, like, you can still train again. So I was like, man, if a gym, because he was like, oh, why don't you go to Gilroy? And I was like, I don't really want to go like drive to jujitsu. I want something local. I was living in Morgan Hill. I was like, if something opens local, I'll come back to training. And then I ended the conversation, but it left me with that itch to come back to train. I was looking for something. Now, even at that time, I was going through it a lot. My daughter was in like high school and just dealing with like boys. I already gotten some dude was like stalking her and he ended up pulling like a mini bat on me and I like beat the shit out of him and like I almost killed him. Like I could have killed him. My wife's, what are you doing? I was like, oh, all right, I can't kill this guy. So I was like, I had all this aggression. A Gracie Baja ended up opening up. And a lot of people, they talk shit about Gracie Baja or like they call it the McDonald's of jiu-jitsu or whatever. But it really changed my life going there. The professor there really taught like a martial arts aspect of, we worked a lot on breathing, movement and stuff. So within 3 months, I was hooked again. I was like, this is my thing. I started over. I didn't come in like saying, because I hated gi when I was younger. I was like, fucking, you'll never catch me in a gi. And then because my little guy was training, I got my son in there first. He was training. And then they had a day on Saturday where if you were a parent there, you can train with your kid. At one point, I'd gotten to train with Henner when I was training law enforcement. I went through this combatives instructor course, and Henner and Orion Gracie in Torrance, California. And they had a museum there that they had a little gi, and it was like a gi that they all had worn, and like that family aspect of the training. I started training to train with my son, and then within 3 months, I was like, I want to compete. I did my first, it was a BJJ tour, white belt, maybe 235. Went to ultra heavyweight. I'm looking at this one guy. I'm like, oh, this is everybody's like looking to see, oh, is that my opponent? I'm looking at this one guy. Oh, so this is my opponent. I'll dust this fool, you know? And then they're like, no, that's not your opponent. And then this big old like 7-foot tall guy ducks under the door. No, they brought him like,
no way.
And I swear it looked like they were carrying him out by his belt and shit. It was like, he ducks under the door. And I was like, I'm 6'5". I was like, oh shit. He was like Andre the Giant, like 500 pounds. And I beat him in like a minute and 20 seconds with a God, it was like my whole body was on this dude's arm. He like grabbed my other arm like I was a little kid. I tried to hip bump sweep him. He moved into side control and I just cranked his arm the other way, turned my hips and cranked his arm. And then I got lapel choked within 30 seconds from the next guy. So I was like, I got to learn this. Lapel game. I trained there for about 2 years. COVID hit. And then my professor ended up moving. I always wanted to train under Kyle. So I went right when COVID started opening up again.
Okay.
I was there for 3.5 years.
Okay.
Now I'm at Solidarity, which is like a total blessing. I love that gym. Everybody there is super friendly. Like I always came from like smaller gyms. And like at Kyle's, it's a big gym. So it's like cliques of people. It's like when you're at a small gym, you're forced to be with friends with everybody there. A cop, a stoner, everybody on the same mat. They're all like friendly. I really like the aspect there. And then the coaches there are like great. Anybody who's been to Coffee Crew, they know Kiko and Fernando and Kirby are all really good guys. I think I'm at like 80 this next week and I'll be going over 80 matches. So yeah, it's a lot. And at Kyle's, they have a comp team, which is invite only. You have to be a comp team, which I never got to train with the comp team. The smaller gym, when I got there, they were really pushing me, my cardio, like pushing Shark Tank kind of drills and new guy every minute, and really helped me prepare for some big matches. And I was able to win the open division at World Masters, and compete at the UFC and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it was all thanks to them. Really good gym.
Kevin, we ended with our last conversation. You were talking about your dojo, Solidarity, why you chose to go there, the whole gym atmosphere and the camaraderie that you have there at the dojo.
So it's funny that it's kind of a blessing in disguise. My wife had gone back to school and training at Kaio's, because I had to pick up more of the picking up the kids after school and stuff like that. It was getting harder and harder to train as much as I needed to with my competition goals that I had. I had spoke with Kaio's and I said, hey, Solidarity is an affiliate gym. I'm going to be transferring over there because it's a little bit closer to home and they had some hours that worked better with my schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So because the advanced class at Kyle's was like 7:30 p.m. By the time I got home, it was just like super late. And then the afternoon class, certain days my son got out early from school, so it was like harder to make it back. I learned a lot under Vitor at Kyle's and the team of coaches. When I transitioned, I just fell in love with the whole team at Solidarity. I mean, everybody's great. I felt welcome since day one. As far as like mental health goes, like finding like a good gym where you feel like family,
Absolutely.
it
It's
helps
important.
not only for, because there's days like I don't want to train where like my depression's bad or whatever, but I feel like if I don't show up, I'm letting down one of my teammates of having a quality training partner there. So at Solidarity, it's definitely one family, one team. They're very welcoming to everybody. Even some of their lower belts, like those guys got heart. There's a lot of gyms I've been to since coming back to jiu-jitsu where like people sit out of roles and be like, oh, I don't want to roll. Or,
Right.
which when I trained back in the day, like especially like Team Fairtex, my old coach Leo would be like, you fucking bitch. You know, it's like, oh, I got to leave early to go pick my kids up. They would be like talking shit. So it's like you rolled against everybody. Everybody at Solidarity, no matter what level they roll and they want to help you out. Even guys are like, oh, they're telling me like, oh, I want to help you prepare for your matches and stuff like that. I really appreciate the team there. It's a great team. I can't speak highly enough about them. And I feel like I found the right team for me and my mental health and my training. I'm getting hit up all the time by guys that I train with, little memes here and there. Leaving the military kind of leaves a hole in your heart as far as camaraderie goes. I'll never find people that are like the brothers I had in the military, but jiu-jitsu comes pretty close. You're going to find guys with dark humor. I got dark humor, so we're getting all these dark humor memes. And so it's like these guys that we just made a bond. We're brothers and sisters through jiu-jitsu. And I really, even meeting you and it's such a small community. You think about there's a lot of gyms, but it's definitely a small community. I look forward to comps and seeing people I haven't seen or meeting new people and becoming friends and being able to share the journey. It's all about the journey.
Yeah, I see that.
The aspect of the gym, it's like being able to help each other grow. Like I remember like when I first started, somebody would choke you and I'd be like, hey, what was that choke? And they'd be like, don't worry about it. And like, you don't learn that way, or you don't. My eyes, if I catch something, somebody with something, and I can see I'm catching it over and over again,
Right.
I'll point out, hey, do these things to
prevent it from
because it's gonna make me stronger. It's gonna make you stronger, and we grow together. And I feel like at Solidarity, everybody's willing to share. A lot of the good senior belts like BAM, Heart Attack, like all these guys that train that are been training for a while, they're very helpful to the younger belts, some of the knowledge. And that's what I want to get into more is teaching. I feel like I taught advanced infantry, government contracted. I have a love for teaching, like really breaking down like some of the principles behind certain techniques. And because I think a lot of people, they learn a technique and you get those guys like, well, what if this or what if that? And you don't understand this. One technique is for one specific moment in time in jiu-jitsu. If you change the arm placement or you do this or do that, it's a different. It took a while too. I remember trying to do the same technique, like say like half guard. We're doing the same pass to get past half guard, but it's different when like their legs are locked or
Right.
or they have knee shield. It's like it's different techniques. But I was trying to do the same technique, and then it's like this technique never works, and it's because you're doing it wrong. It's like things like that. I want to get into teaching, and so I think next year in the new year, I might be picking up a couple afternoon classes, teaching passion.
That's very rewarding, teaching.
Yeah. And I think too, at 44, I've been doing, where they told me in 2022, I couldn't walk for a couple months. They said I needed hip replacement.
Mm-hmm.
So I just went on like YouTube and looked up like rehabilitation and almost walked away completely from the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And then my coach Vitor was calling me like, hey, where you at? How you doing? And it really gave me a drive to, kind of rehabilitate. And then I was like, how much longer do I have to reach some of my goals? Because I feel like a lot of times people are like, oh, I'll compete, but when I get my blue belt, or I'll compete when I do this, or when they put it off so much. And it's no, the time's now. So when I had my scare of like my hip surgery, I was like, I'm just going to come back and compete as much as I can. And at first I set a 1-year goal of competing every month.
Mm-hmm.
And now this month, this coming Sunday will be 2 years straight of competing every month and going to be over 80 matches. So
that's a good accomplishment.
Yeah, no. And two, the reason I do that now, looking back, like why I compete so much. One, it helps me sometimes with my mental health, because I feel like life's not going too good, and I'll sign up for a comp and be like, okay, this gives me something to focus on. And because I believe that as far as mental health goes, having a rigid schedule and commitments, it helps you as far as get through it. Like actually, sometimes when I'm depressed, I'm better like on my diet. I'm better on because I stick to my regimen. So it gives me just kind of like a purpose, a drive to do something. And with all my injuries that I have right now, I'm like, what's the next step? I think teaching will also fill that void of keeping commitments. They just said no more jokes. No more adult jokes,
when
while
you teach.
Teaching. Yeah. I don't do it when I teach, but sometimes on the mat, I'll joke around.
Yeah.
With certain guys. But it's you gotta laugh when you got somebody's testicles in your face and they're trying to like north south. It's like, I signed up for this.
That's funny.
Yeah. Or they go for the knee cut and it's not definitely it's a knee cut, but in the wrong area.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll joke around like that. I used to joke, if this is my first lesson, I'd probably never come back.
So when's the plan for surgery?
I put it off.
Okay.
I had 7 wrist surgeries, and the first one, they're like, oh, it's going to cure it. And then it made it worse. So and plus I'm going through the VA, which is you get like, they graduated school, but they're doing their vocational. So you get like one doctor leading the surgery of these students that just came out of school. And two, the parts from hip surgery only last like 25 years. I'm sure the VA don't use the best quality ones. So I don't want to put a pause on like my jiu-jitsu. Maybe like once I get to black belt, maybe take a break or something like that to get surgery. But it's been pretty good. The one thing about jiu-jitsu is it forces me to stretch daily and warm up and do all that. So I'm just kind of pushing on it. Some days it's bad, some days it's good, but right now it's feeling pretty good. But I started picking up more strength conditioning, like deadlifting, doing stuff that I didn't normally do to help me stay strong for competing. Hopefully I could put it off. But the thing from all my jumps, I was a fast rope company in the military. So fast roping, when you land, you kind of land with your legs spread and then all your weight comes down, like you're almost doing like a squat. My hip, like the femur bone that goes into the hip, is oval from getting smashed down so much instead of round. Yeah. So, and then it's like it has a bunch of chips in it, like a ratchet on a handcuff. So certain positions, yeah, I actually had to, with my hip and then my right hand, I have limited use of my right hand. I had to retrain myself for my left side, my offside. So now I'm better at my offside than I am on my strong side. So it's weird. Before, when we went on break, we were talking about injuries and stuff like that. And I don't believe in you should be rolling hard or whatever, but you should definitely, I look at injuries as a way to adapt my game.
Same here.
To injuries. And that's one thing too. I tell vets that are scared. A lot of vets are like, I'm disabled or have this or that. I'm in the same boat. But if you are speak up to your coaches and to your training partners, usually you get your occasional asshole in jiu-jitsu that goes for, be like, oh, my knee hurts, and the guy's knee bar. It's like, generally it's everybody's very kind and accommodating to injuries. There's certain warm-ups that I won't do because my hip. So I explain to the coach, At Kyle's, we used to have to explain to every coach, which sometimes they rotate, but they know at Solidarity that I got certain injuries that I can't do certain things just
Right.
for I don't want a chance aggravating it. So, and then everybody's very generally, because when you're all pretzeled up, it's kind of hard. Like for me, I'm a little bit special needs. I'm be like, I don't know. If somebody tells me my left elbow's messed up, I'm like, when we're all tangled up, I don't know. I just don't go for your arm. I usually tell people, I'll let you know if I have an injury, because I've had those people where you tell them, oh, my elbow or my knee hurts, and they go for it. It's like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? I'll let you
Yeah.
know, which is also my excuse when I'm tired. No. Oh, it's injury. It's injury.
You were saying in regards to projects that you're involved in outside of jiu-jitsu, you were involved with the vets and the medical marijuana
Yeah.
movement. What's your future in that area?
Well,
Are you-
so lately I took a step back. I've been doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff.
Mhm.
Like I said, there was like a lot of, you're dealing with a lot of mental health issues, and I got my own mental health issues. So I took a seat back from being in the limelight and I do like our website and I do all our flyers and
Mhm.
I'll go places and make videos and stuff like that. But it's hard because with family and then like jujitsu is like my life. Like,
Mhm.
I don't work. I don't do anything else other than train.
Mhm.
And so it's like my love for jujitsu kind of outweighs, and then my family kind of outweighs a lot. But veterans will always have a place in my heart. So hopefully I can get to a point where things are starting to run a little bit more smoothly because it's only 3 of us handling. We used to be nationwide, but
Mhm.
since Prop 64 came about with the legalization, which it was legal before under Prop 215, and there was more leeway on what we can do. But when Prop 64 took over, we would have had to pay the tax on anything we give out. So
Oh, wow.
if we gave out $600 of cannabis,
Mm.
there's like a 40% tax right now on cannabis, or even higher.
Mhm.
We'd have to come up with that tax. So
Right.
we were like, how the fuck can we do that? So we fought for a compassion law
Mhm.
and went down like with 40, 50 vets down the SAC and went office to office saying, if you don't vote for this compassion law, we're going to put you on blast that you don't support
Right.
veterans and
Mhm.
stuff. So we strong armed this compassion law, which makes it to where a company can donate cannabis within California. They don't have to pay the California tax if they donate it. So they still
That's
have to pay like a bit cost of growing it and all that, but they have, in California, they have 1 year to sell their product. And
right.
so if that year's coming up, they don't sell that product, they're still paying taxes on this product.
Mhm.
But if they donate it to a medical patient, they don't have to pay the tax. So we fought for that, but it has to go through dispensaries. So that dispensary has to actually pay their employees to distribute it. So it's still some cost, but we do have a handful of dispensaries that really care about the community.
Mhm.
They're not just corporate. We've been working with them since, I think, 2022 is when the law came into effect. I could be wrong, but I believe it was 2022. And yeah, we've given out millions in cannabis to veterans, but
Mhm.
more so than the medicine. Because before, when we first started, we were more like, we'd hold social events. Like we'd
Okay.
have a DJ, we'd have food, and we'd give out medicine, but at the very end, because we wanted vets to meet. Because a lot of vets, like I said, we don't get along with a lot of people, or we're like salty, or we're rude, or we're like just assholes. But you can always meet another asshole and get along. And so like what saved my life wasn't cannabis, it was meeting another vet who was calling me to make sure I was okay,
Right.
and that saved my life. So if we can connect vets, so when we still hold these meetings, vets we do it by a lotto, because they'll be like, the dispensary will be like, oh, we have 100 bags to give out. So the first 100 vets that come get a wristband. So if you come up after that, sometimes we're able to fill more bags, but
Mm.
we're dependent upon the donation from these companies. But these vets are still able to meet people waiting for these events, because sometimes we're there 2 hours early. So they get there, they have to wait. So they're able to meet people. And that's one aspect I always
Yeah.
push the vets, like when you're at these events, try to make a friend, because you never know, you could be saving that person's life one day or vice versa. That's
Yeah.
where too, I get that now from jujitsu.
Mhm.
Like jujitsu I just spoke on the old man.
The old grappler?
I shared a story. There was maybe a couple of Father's Days ago. I was like doing pretty bad mentally.
Mm.
I still struggle with suicidal ideation, but I started that ketamine trial,
Okay.
which I'll talk about right after this. I was doing pretty bad. Like, I used to buy books on like easiest ways to kill yourself, stuff like that. There's like
Mhm.
a one that put out, you can buy on Amazon and stuff like that. So I was like reading books and taking certain kinds of salt or doing helium,
Mhm.
filling up a room with like helium so it cuts out the oxygen, certain things like that. I was being in a dark place and somebody had called me and it was like, hey, come to open mat on Sunday or whatever. So
Mhm.
then again, it gave me like a purpose. Then I felt better after
Right.
that. I started the ketamine trials because I kind of have the treatment resistant PTSD just from childhood and then the
Mhm.
military and stuff. And I've actually have had zero suicidal ideation since completing the first initial 2 months of it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And even my scores, like they give you this survey, a couple like pages of like
Mhm.
questions about like sleep, depression, and PTSD related survey.
Mhm.
And I've always scored very shitty on it, and then my scores improved by a percent. I don't see why people do this recreationally. There's definitely some scary moments on it, but
Mhm.
the way the doctor described it to me, it's like going through 1,000 hours of psychotherapy in one session.
So can you give me a little bit of background how it's given to you and what kind of thoughts that you go through in the process?
So when I have a couple friends that have done ketamine, actual real ketamine. This is a sketamine, which is like one part of the ketamine.
Uh-huh.
But I get to the VA, which one it's at the VA hospital. So I'm thinking mental ward. I'm thinking like I'm going to do something crazy. They're going to lock me back up kind of thing. Cause I always tell people my mind's a dark place. And I've tried a lot of plant-based medicine like mushrooms, LSD and stuff like that, DMT to try to see if it would help my PTSD.
Mhm.
And I've had some dark like trips on that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
when I showed up in the VA, I had a little bit of anxiety. They check your blood pressure um, throughout it because it can elevate your heart rate. And so they come in, they gave me like it's a nasal spray. So
Okay.
you lean your head back and it's just like, when you have allergies or
Mhm.
whatever, like the over the counter nasal
Yeah,
spray.
for
So you snort half of it, the bottle goes halfway, it clicks and it up one nostril and you do the other nostril that you have to wait 5 minutes. Then they give you the other one, which I got up to 3 doses per nostril. So 6
Mhm.
shots total, but they ask you this survey like right before you're already like starting a trip and they're like, is life real? Like these weird questions. Do you think about suicide? Like all these questions, which I feel like kind of fuck you up when you're going into the mindset.
Right.
But the first couple times were like really dark. Like I was seeing like blood everywhere and like skeletons and just like reliving childhood stuff that I didn't really want to think about.
Mhm.
And because you at the first initial, you go twice a week. So by the third session, I was like, I'm not going back because it was like showing me that the only way I'm going to escape this, like I got visions of jumping out of the window
Oh,
when
wow.
I was there. It's like the only way I'm going to escape this kind of like mindset I have or like everything that's going fucked up in my head is like death. And then I heard another vet talking just about it on Instagram, just sharing a thought.
Mhm.
And he was saying that if becoming a Marine or he was a Marine, but becoming a military is hard, right? It's like you go through all these breakdowns mentally and all that to get to the point of graduating from your boot camp or whatever schools you were going to. In the transition, it's going to be twice as hard to go back to trying to find yourself.
Mhm.
So like before, earlier in the podcast, I talked about Plato's comment about there's no end to war but death. I believe that means death to your persona or death to who you are right now, metaphorically, reinventing yourself, like die to, I think Jim Carrey talks about it. Like when you're depressed, it's your avatar telling you it's time to change characters. So
Right.
I went back and again to the ketamine treatment and just more on detaching from feelings of guilt or shame or things that have plagued me like my whole life. Another big thing that helps too is finding the right music that you listen to
Mhm.
during it. Definitely not country. That shit's sad. I was like crying the whole time. But I found like some lo-fi, like hip hop, and two, because sometimes you'll start going down this trip, and I try to stay in the moment. Like, I try not to open my eyes, because like, sometimes you open your eyes, you feel like you're upside down, or like your hands are small, or like you feel like cartoony.
Uh-huh.
I try to stay in that, well, good or bad, whatever it is, to see the
Right.
outcome. But then when the song changes, a lot of times it changes whatever trip I was going down. So music definitely has a big part in the process of it. But like, every session I had then really helped me detach from a lot of the negative feelings I had. So
Mhm.
they're trying to find me like an outside place to continue, because they said I'd be a good candidate to continue the treatment. But it's like all the way in Palo Alto, and it's like hard to get to. So you have to have a driver, you can't drive. The only thing that kind of still came back, like I said, I've had zero suicidalization. I still get irritated by people in public. That came back, where it's like, fucking dude, I wish I could just fuck this guy up. But then I lean on my jujitsu. I don't want to put I guess, a black eye or like negative
Yeah.
view on like martial arts or
Right.
jujitsu. So I still try to, like I said before, jujitsu is like it's my church, it's my counselor, it's my moral compass. So
Yeah.
it helps me stay not psycho. There's always that, and I don't want to get in trouble, because then too, like, some of these people on the street, like, they think they know what they're doing, but like, I know straight dorks that would murder somebody. You look at some of these like best jujitsu guys, they're like autistic and like dorky, and they'll freaking, I don't care how hardcore you think, you get on the mat with this guy, he's gonna tear you up.
The smallest guy, nerdiest looking.
Yeah. It's like the guy with the fanny pack wearing like a whole rainbow of colors, you know? Like, they're gonna come and freaking murder you on the mat. Yeah, I finished the ketamine treatment, and during that time too, I didn't use any cannabis, because I wanted to try to give it a chance to work. I recommend it to anybody who's struggling. Like, they put me on every different kind of med, all that. There's no specific medication for PTSD. There's
Right.
only things that can treat certain areas that you're having a hard time in. I tried to open my mind up, because before, like, when I joined the military, and I'll never do drugs again. I'll never do anything that's viewed negatively by, I guess, a conservative mindset, because the military is very conservative. But out of all the plant-based medicine I've done, I've got the most benefit out of, or I wouldn't say plant-based, out of alternative medicines I've done. Ketamine has helped me a lot.
That's great.
But training after it sucked.
Did it?
Yeah, just
How did
because
it
I felt
affect you?
groggy.
Oh, okay.
I felt space cadet, dizzy, like my cardio felt off. I think the day before I went to World Masters, I had a ketamine treatment. Only the good thing is it takes away all anxiety. Like, you don't feel no anxiety at all, or you're very like accepting of whatever the outcome is, its outcome. So I was like blasted on ketamine, and then flew out.
So you have a couple more competitions for this year?
Yeah, I got I ran myself like $4,000 in debt on doing like some of these super fights, because I think there was 2 months in a row where I did back to back, like every week I was doing a match, and they were like in Vegas or SoCal, or I'm doing this one. I tried to do a super fight, but the guy pulled out because he said I was too big. Like 20 pounds over the guy's weight. He said I'm too big. And then I took this BJJ tour, which is cool, because that's where I started my journey of competing every month. Was their BJJ tour. They're like a second family. I know most of the people there, and it's always fun to do their matches, because it's local enough. December, I'm going to probably sign up for Nogi Worlds. And then January, I always say I'm going to take a month off, but I got to prepare for February. I'm going to rematch against a black belt. I'd done Nogi Worlds, and then the UFC event was supposed to be before this Solidarity Jiu-Jitsu event. So I had Nogi Worlds, not Solidarity, the Subversive Jiu-Jitsu event, and the UFC event. The UFC event, I was already injured when I did World Masters. Pretty bad.
Oh, wow.
I was bringing ice to the gym, like in between matches, I was icing down, or in between training. It was pretty bad. And it was so bad that if I didn't already commit to these things, I probably would have pulled out. Once I commit to something, I don't show up injured or not. So I did this match, and in the middle of the match, they fucking changed I guess they confused it with a combatant jiu-jitsu, where they have the get down rule. And so my whole plan was like, wear this guy down and then take him down. And they made us get down, and he got top position, which kind of just threw me off. He caught me in a guillotine. My neck was pretty cranked. I was like, I'm not going to risk. It was my injured arm plus, and I want to do this UFC event. So I had to reluctantly I tapped out. But
No.
because generally, like, I've had matches where guys have had my foot or had something, and they were like, "Bro, like, what's going on? Like, why are you tapping?" I'm like, "Fucking break it!" Like, I get looked. But it's like when you have a match like that where you know you could have done better and you let it slide. It ate at me because usually I don't care about rematches, but the organization apologized right after. Then I said I want a rematch, but at first he was saying no.
Uh-huh.
Then he finally accepted for February next year. And that might be one of my, like I say that, but then now ADCC is doing March in San Jose. March might be one of my last matches.
Okay.
And I might just do some like big match, like just do World Masters. Competing every month, it wears you down.
Oh, I bet
To
it
keep
is.
that cardio level up the whole for 2 years straight, I'm pretty worn down. And it's like I have no nerves anymore when I compete. It's just like showing up for like open mat. My favorite quotes from a movie is from the Knockaround Guys. You ever seen that movie?
No.
It's like Vin Diesel, and there's a bar fight scene, and the guy who's like the neighborhood tough guy who they want to take out, like shows up to their table and he starts trying to punk him out. Vin Diesel stands up and he goes 500, and the guy's 500. What the fuck? What's that? He's like, the number I put in my head of how many fights it would take before I was a tough guy. And he's like, along the journey, you know what I found out? And then he fucking headbutts the guy and knocks him out. It's just, I set a goal for 100. I wanted to reach 100 matches before I hang it up, as far as, and just stick more to teaching and just compete once in a while. Before, like, I got this urge to do it every year. I used to just do it like maybe 3 times a year just to test where I'm at in jiu-jitsu. But out of like 80 matches, I think I only have 8 or 9, maybe 10 losses, but it's mostly by points. It's just when you play the point rule and somebody gets points on you, especially in the bigger weights, they'll get points and then try to hold on to you for fucking
the rest of the last 3 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, ultra heavyweights. I say it's judo match and then lay and pray. You know? They say 85% of the time, like somebody ends up on top. They usually win the matches in the bigger weight classes.
I've seen a couple of your matches and you move pretty well.
Yeah, I pull guard. I do whatever. It's just I've learned small man jiu-jitsu, and none of my coaches have ever been tall, so I've learned the small man jiu-jitsu. I just apply it as a bigger guy.
I had another question for you. Growing up in an abusive home with an abusive family, we have a lot of listeners that are younger. Is there anything you want to say to them, how to get through it?
Definitely, you got to open up. You got to let it out. You got to talk to somebody. If that's counseling, even when I was little, the experiences I had with my mom telling me, don't tell the police or don't tell people what's going on at home, I was very shut off because I felt like, well, too, being raised by my dad, I felt like he'd see me as weak if I told these counselors, because they put me through a program called Kids Are Special, which is like for kids coming from like places I came from. I never talked shit about nothing. Like I sat in that thing, just didn't say anything because I didn't want to be looked at, because being abused and stuff like that, I didn't want to look less than a man. But if I could look back, I wish that I took the opportunity to speak more and be more open. That's why I told you I'm pretty open about stuff that's happened to me, because I don't care about what people think about me. It's about what makes me feel good as a person. And a lot of times, like with my story, there's somebody out there who has similar. The more you talk about it, the more you see that it helps other people. So I would just say the biggest thing is be open. You got to be open. And if you can get into jiu-jitsu, I think jiu-jitsu is a lot better than any other martial art because they just don't hand you fucking belts. I've been at it now 13 years and I'm a purple belt. If I did karate, I'd be a black belt by 12 years old. It's definitely something that is a grind and is symbolic to life. There's ups and downs. There's like one of my old professors used to say, jiu-jitsu is not for when you're doing everything's great. It's for when you're breathing through a straw, being smothered to death, and it's like you feel like life's caving in on you and you're just looking for that right opportunity to escape or transition or get to a better position. And I feel like in life it's helped me more than anything as far as structure. Yeah, but if I can say anything to these younger people out here that have experienced stuff, you got to talk about it, got to let it out, because it's just going to fester and make everything else in your life worse. Like it drove me to death. to seeking death because I felt like there was no way out. But then the more I talk about it, it's like I get other people who tell me similar situations they've been through, and
Yeah,
I just talk about it.
that's great. Would you like to talk a little bit about your family right now?
I got 2 older kids who really saw me at my worst, and they're both doing great now. My daughter just finished cosmetology school. She's renting a chair at a salon. She's going to continue to go to school. When you're a disabled vet, they get like a stipend to go to school, and
That's
their school
great.
gets paid for. I think California pays for a certain amount of your school anyway, but they get a stipend on top of it. My older son, he joined the Marines, which it's not something it's not that I didn't want him to join the military. I'm down against joining the military. Or against people joining the military. I just feel like it's a heavy burden to carry, as far as it's going to leave a void in you when you leave. And a lot dealing with a lot of vets, I see a lot of suicide, a lot of depression, and I feel like because they're missing that, not only kind of like the statute they have in the military, like makes you feel like proud to be whatever, 24 years old, in charge of 14 different schools, training over 15,000 people, and having all these awards and all this, and then you get out and you're fucking nobody. The camaraderie, but he joined. I just asked him not to join infantry because losing friends sucks. And I feel, especially with everything that's going on in the country or in the world right now, I feel like World War III or some kind of shit like that's right around the corner.
Yeah.
If you look at history, it's every 10 years there's a major conflict. And since Iraq popped off, it's about time for something to go down. And I just didn't want him to deal with losing friends and having that survivor guilt and stuff like that. But he's a firefighter in the Marine Corps.
Oh, great.
He's also a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. Last time he was out, again with solidarity, it's like I asked him if I can give him a stripe because he got to train with me for about a month when he came home. They allowed me to give him a stripe.
What an honor.
And then I have a daughter who's 17, a senior. She's going to be like a doctor or something. She doesn't get her smarts from me. She's been a straight A student since like she started school. And I have my little guy who's 10, that's the baby of the family. That's cool too. I feel like I've broken through a lot of this like disciplinary kind of, like I was raised into more like just love your kid and just show love no matter good, bad, whatever. My parenting's definitely changed since my older too.
The older you get, the more lenient you get with the younger ones.
Well, too, then also jiu-jitsu has calmed me down a lot.
Sure.
Like, I'm so tired all day. It's like, Dad, I want this. I'm like, just do it. Like, whatever. just you can have it. He was training striking at Solidarity, but they took a break from the striking kids class, but I think it's going to come back next year.
Okay, great. And then your wife.
Yeah, she actually, she's a trooper. We've been together for a long time. 24 years, going on 25, and I put her through a lot, and she's stuck around. I don't know why, my good looks, I guess. She's stuck around, but she just went back to school. There's been some rocky situations in, living with me. Like my nickname's not just my nickname, I'm fucking nuts, So she's dealt with that, but she just went back to school with my daughter and got her cosmetology. And so she's doing cosmetology too. And I think that she's going to thrive in that. She's so good at anything she puts her mind to. She's really good. But I feel like that's something she's always been interested in. And so I think she was one of the top people in her class.
Oh, that's great.
Graduating. So she's at Alta. She works at Alta in their like salon area. So she's doing good with that. She's had to support me so much through like my endeavors. I feel like now it's a chance I get to give back to her. Like being home, like I like being Mr. Mom. It's cool to me. I got great kids, so it's pretty easy. I like being around my kids. Once you deploy and you do shit like that, you realize how important things that people take for granted, how important the little things are. Then especially after a suicide attempt, you realize that life has its ups and downs, but I live for the moment. And one thing that jiu-jitsu has helped me realize is how to be more in the moment. I feel like when you're on the mat, you don't have time to think about anything else other than this person's trying to choke me right now. And it's applied to life. I live for those little moments. Like, to me, there's no such thing as, oh, I'm happy or I'm this or that. It's just be in the moment
Right.
and experience life in the moment. And having kids, it also is very healing because I get to be the dad or see my wife be the mom that I wish I had. It's a great feeling to have her by my side and her put up with all my craziness.
That is so great. That's
Yeah.
awesome. One of these days, I hope to meet your whole family. I think with that, we should be able to end the podcast right now. And that's on a great note.
Thank you again for having me on here. I feel like it's an honor to be your first person on the podcast. And I look forward to seeing you guys thrive and continue on with this because I think it's great to hear the background stories on some of these practitioners out here and how
Yeah.
they came because I feel like the community is just going to bring us closer. And like same thing with your photography, going around taking pictures, it captures moments that people will cherish for a lifetime. The thing too with the podcast is when I taught law enforcement, I would have everybody write down what they thought somebody came from, around the room.
Yeah.
And then it was like total opposite of what the person actually, but I think that when you hear somebody's story and you see it, and it makes you have appreciation for the person.
Absolutely.
So it's great.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you again. It's an honor on this special day, Veterans Day. And I'd like to thank you for your contribution to this country and serving. Also, I'm very happy that you're in a really good place and you continue to strive in jiu-jitsu and life.
Thank you.